ticking of the wall clock was the only sound in the room. He glanced toward the hallway, where the sound of Mia's heels faded into the distance. "Working late again," she'd said, kissing his cheek with a practiced ease that felt oddly mechanical. For weeks, something had been gnawing at Eric's gut. Mia's late nights at the office had grown more frequent, her excuses more rehearsed. He'd dismissed it at first. Her role at the marketing firm was demanding, and he admired her drive. But the small changes began to pile up. Her laughter, once a melody that filled their home, now sounded distant. The way she quickly stashed her phone out of sight when he walked into the room. The faint whiff of a cologne he didn't recognize lingering on her scarf one evening. He brushed the thoughts aside, telling himself he was overthinking. After all, they'd been married for 8 years, partners through thick and thin. But doubt has a way of sinking its claws deep, and Eric couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't until he found the receipt that his suspicions solidified into something more tangible. Eric was tidying the kitchen when it caught his eye. A receipt from a luxury hotel downtown. The date matched one of Mia's supposed late-night work sessions, and the signature on the bill was hers. 2 entrees, a bottle of wine, and dessert. Eric's mind raced as he stared at the piece of paper. He wanted to believe there was a simple explanation, but the more he tried to rationalize, the more the seed of doubt grew. That night, he sat in his car outside the house, wrestling with the storm of emotion swirling inside him. Could he confront her? Demand answers? No, he thought, not yet. The next day, he stopped by an electronics store and purchased a small, discreet camera. He'd read about such devices online, but never imagined he'd be using one himself. The guilt gnawed at him as he set it up in their living room, carefully concealing it within the bookshelf. Eric told himself it was the only way to confirm or dispel his fears. The following evening, Mia returned home late, her demeanor unusually bright for someone who claimed to have been swamped at work. Eric played his part, asking about her day with feigned casualness. Her answers were crisp, practiced, and he noticed how she avoided meeting his gaze. When she finally went to bed, Eric retrieved the footage from the hidden camera. His heart pounded as he watched the screen, dreading what he might find. At first, it was nothing out of the ordinary. Mia entering the house, kicking off her shoes, pouring a glass of wine. But then, there was a knock at the door. Eric's blood ran cold as he watched her greet a man he didn't recognize. They laughed, their conversation too muffled to make out. The stranger reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and the way she leaned into his touch was all the confirmation Eric needed. His world crumbled in that moment. Every late-night excuse, every stifled giggle at her phone, every distant look, everything made sense now. Eric closed his laptop, his jaw clenched tight as he stared into the darkness of the room. But he wasn't just angry. He was determined. If Mia had secrets, he would uncover every last one of them. Eric couldn't sleep that night. The revelation played over and over in his mind, each moment from the footage digging deeper into his chest. He lay staring at the ceiling, his heart heavy, his mind racing. 1,000 questions swirled in his head. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? Most haunting of all, why? Morning came too quickly, and Eric found himself sipping coffee at the kitchen counter, his appetite absent. Across the room, Mia breathed in, her usual morning energy seeming almost insulting now. She hummed softly as she prepared her smoothie, oblivious to the storm brewing inside her husband. "Big plans today?" Eric asked, his tone neutral as he hid behind his coffee mug. "Just the usual," Mia replied without looking at him. "Meetings all day, and then I'll probably stay late to finish up some reports." She smiled over her shoulder. "Don't wait up." He nodded, his stomach twisting at the ease with which she lied. It took every ounce of self-retreat not to confront her right there. But Eric knew he needed more. He needed the full picture. Once Mia left, Eric's focus sharpened. The first step was identifying the man from the footage. He rewatched the video, pausing at every clear frame of the stranger's face. There was something familiar about him, a nagging sense that he'd seen him before. A coworker? An old friend of Mia's? The connection eluded him, but Eric was determined to find out. The breakthrough came later that day when Eric remembered the company gala he'd attended with Mia the previous year. She'd introduced him to a colleague named Logan, a charismatic, confident man who had lingered in conversations just a little too long. Eric searched Mia's social media accounts and scrolled through her posts until he found a photo from that night. There he was, Logan. The caption read, "Great night with amazing co-workers." Now, Eric had a name to match the face, and his next move was clear. He called Tina, his younger sister and confidant. Tina had always been a rock in Eric's life, someone he could rely on to be both empathetic and pragmatic. "Something's wrong, Eric. You never call me this early," Tina said, her voice tinged with concern. "I need your help," Eric said, explaining everything. The hotel receipt, the hidden camera, Logan's face. It all poured out in a torrent of frustration and pain. Tina listened without interrupting, and when Eric finished, she took a deep breath. "Okay," she said. "First of all, you're not crazy, and you're not overreacting. This is big. If she's cheating, and it sounds like she is, you need to protect yourself." They devised a plan. Tina, who worked in IT, would help Eric dig deeper into Mia's digital life. Over the years, Mia had become complacent about securing her devices, often using the same passwords for multiple accounts. That afternoon, with Tina's guidance, Eric accessed Mia's emails and messages. What he found turned his stomach. Dozens of emails and chat logs confirmed what he already knew. Mia and Logan's affair wasn't a fleeting mistake. It was a calculated, ongoing betrayal. The messages ranged from flirtatious to explicit, peppered with inside jokes and plans for secret rendezvous. One particular thread caught Eric's eye. Logan had mentioned hitting the jackpot by being with her and suggested that Mia deserved more than her boring life. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It seemed there was something deeper at play. Another thread revealed discussions about questionable expenses charged to the company, suggesting that Mia and Logan were involved in some kind of fraudulent scheme. The hotel receipts Eric had found were just the tip of the iceberg. Armed with this new information, Eric felt a grim determination settle over him. This wasn't just about his marriage anymore. It was about exposing the full extent of their deception. He documented everything meticulously, saving screenshots and downloading files. Every damning piece of evidence was another step toward the truth. By the time Mia returned home that evening, Eric had already begun building his case. He greeted her with the same calm, measured tone as always, concealing the storm that raged beneath. But for the first time, as she kissed his cheek and told him about her busy day, Eric didn't feel hurt. He felt resolute. The next morning, Eric awoke with a sense of clarity, his grief and confusion slowly giving way to a cold, calculating focus. He stood by the kitchen window, staring out at the dew-covered lawn as the sun climbed the horizon. This was no longer about Mia's infidelity. It was about justice, closure, and ensuring that the tangled mess she and Logan had created wouldn't consume his life any further. Mia entered the kitchen with her usual flair, humming a tune under her breath. She smiled at Eric, her eyes sparkling in a way that felt disingenuous now. "You're up early," she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Couldn't sleep," Eric replied, keeping his tone neutral. Mia barely noticed his distant demeanor. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and Eric's eyes flicked toward it. She grabbed it quickly, her face lighting up briefly before she tucked the device into her purse. "Busy day ahead?" he asked, feigning casual interest. "Always is," she said, planting a quick kiss on his cheek before heading out. "Don't wait up." As the door clicked shut behind her, Eric let out a long breath. She was so confident in her lies, so sure he was oblivious. It was almost insulting. But that confidence would be her undoing. Eric spent the day methodically piecing together his findings. Tina, ever the reliable partner in this endeavor, had helped him retrieve more damning evidence the night before. Bank statements, transaction logs, and emails painted a grim picture of Logan and Mia's scheme. The two had been funneling company funds into personal accounts, using their illicit relationship as a cover for fraudulent activity. It wasn't just infidelity, it was embezzlement. Eric knew this added layer of betrayal made his case even stronger, and it steeled his resolve to see it through. That afternoon, Eric made his way to Mia's office building, careful to remain unseen. His goal wasn't a dramatic confrontation, but rather an observation. He parked across the street and waited. Sure enough, Logan appeared an hour later, walking out with Mia. Logan's arm brushed hers as they strolled down the sidewalk, laughing. Eric felt a pang of anger, but swallowed it down. This wasn't the time for emotion. Instead, he discreetly snapped photos with his phone, each one another piece of evidence to solidify the narrative he was building. Back home, Eric compiled everything into a single, organized folder: emails, photos, screenshots, and transaction records, all meticulously categorized. He sent a copy to Tina, who agreed to keep it secure. He also reached out to a trusted lawyer, arranging a meeting for the following week. By the time Mia returned that evening, Eric was ready to confront her, on his terms. She walked through the door with the same breezy demeanor, kicking off her heels and setting her purse on the counter. "Long day?" Eric asked, leaning casually against the doorway. "Exhausting," she replied, rubbing her temples. "But productive." "Productive?" Eric echoed, his voice sharp enough to make her pause. She turned to look at him, her brow furrowing. "Yeah, why do you ask?" Eric stepped forward, holding up his phone. On the screen was a photo he'd taken that afternoon. Mia and Logan leaving the office together. Her face went pale. "What is this, Mia?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with steel. "Why don't you tell me?" Her mouth opened and closed, searching for an excuse. "Eric, it's not what it looks like." "Really? Because it looks like my wife has been sneaking around behind my back with a coworker. It looks like the woman I've spent 8 years building a life with has been lying to my face." His voice remained controlled, but the pain was evident. Mia's eyes darted around the room, as though searching for an escape. "Eric, you're overreacting. Logan and he's just a friend." "Stop!" Eric's voice cut through her protests like a blade. He pulled out a stack of papers, emails, bank statements, the hotel receipts. "I have proof, Mia, of everything. The affair, the money. Do you want to keep lying, or are you finally ready to be honest?" Her facade cracked. Mia's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, Eric thought she might come clean. But then her expression hardened. "So you've been spying on me?" she snapped, her tone shifting to indignation. "What kind of husband does that?" Eric let out a bitter laugh. "The kind who's tired of being made a fool of. Don't turn this around on me, Mia. You did this. You lied, you cheated, and, from the looks of it, you broke the law." At that, her eyes widened, genuine fear flickering across her face. "What are you talking about?" "You and Logan siphoning money from the company," Eric said, tossing the papers onto the table. "I have everything I need to expose you, both of you." "Eric, please," Mia's voice softened, her bravado crumbling. "It's not what you think. I was going to tell you." "Spare me," Eric interrupted, his voice firm. "You're not sorry for what you've done. You're sorry you got caught." Mia stood frozen, her face a mask of panic and defiance. Eric stepped back, his gaze cold. "I've already contacted a lawyer," he said. "I'm filing for divorce, and I'm taking all of this to your boss. You and Logan can deal with the fallout." "Eric, wait." She started, but he cut her off with a raised hand. Don't. He left her standing in the kitchen, her world crumbling as he walked away. For the first time in weeks, Eric felt a strange sense of peace. The truth was out, and he was ready to take the next step. Without her. The morning after their confrontation, Eric stood in his lawyer's office, the weight of the previous night still pressing on his chest. Across the polished desk sat Amanda Grayson, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney with a reputation for winning tough cases. "I've seen a lot of betrayals in my line of work," Amanda said as she sifted through the stack of evidence Eric had brought. "But this? The affair is bad enough, but the embezzlement? That's a whole new level." Eric nodded, his jaw tight. "I'm not just here for a divorce, Amanda. I want justice. Mia and Logan have used their positions to steal, and I don't want this swept under the rug." Amanda leaned back in her chair, a thoughtful expression on her face. "With what you've given me, we can take this to her employer and potentially the authorities. But first, let's focus on securing your financial and legal position. We need to protect you before we go public." Eric left the office feeling a mix of determination and dread. As much as he wanted to move forward, the reality of dismantling his life with Mia was sobering. 8 years of marriage, shared memories, and intertwined routines, it all felt tainted now, like a beautiful painting smeared with mud. Meanwhile, Mia's world was beginning to crumble. She had spent the night frantically calling Logan, but he hadn't answered. At work, the usual buzz of office chatter felt suffocating as she forced herself through the motions of her day. Every time someone glanced her way, she wondered if Eric had already exposed her. By lunchtime, she couldn't take the anxiety any longer. She cornered Logan in the break room, her voice a harsh whisper. "Why didn't you answer my calls?" she hissed. "Eric knows everything. He has emails, bank records, everything." Logan looked around nervously, his normally confident demeanor cracking. "Calm down, Mia. You're overreacting. What can he actually do?" Mia shook her head, her voice trembling. "You don't understand. He's already contacted a lawyer. He's going to the company. If this gets out—" She stopped, her throat tightening. Logan grabbed her arm, pulling her into an empty conference room. "Listen to me," he said, his tone low and urgent. "We stick to our story. Deny everything. There's no way he can prove we were working together. He'll look like a bitter husband trying to ruin your career." But Mia wasn't convinced. Eric's words from the night before echoed in her mind. "You're not sorry for what you've done. You're sorry you got caught." At home, Eric began the slow process of untangling his life from Mia's. He canceled their joint credit cards and transferred his share of savings into a secure account. Every step felt like reclaiming a piece of himself, a reminder that he was more than the man she had betrayed. He also began reaching out to trusted friends and family, sharing the truth about what had happened. His sister Tina was his first call, her outrage palpable even over the phone. "I always knew there was something off about her," Tina said. "You deserved so much better, Eric. She never appreciated you." As word spread among their circle, Eric found an unexpected ally in Mia's former friend Julia. Julia had drifted apart from Mia over the years, but when she heard about the affair, she reached out to Eric. "I always wondered about Logan," Julia admitted when they met for coffee. "Mia used to talk about him a lot, even when we were out with friends. I just thought she admired him. I didn't realize it was more." Eric listened intently, his resolve strengthening. The more pieces he collected, the clearer the picture became. Mia and Logan hadn't just betrayed him, they had built the relationship on lies and deceit, manipulating everyone around them. As the days passed, Eric's lawyer began working behind the scenes to put pressure on Mia and Logan. Amanda sent a formal letter to Mia's employer, detailing the evidence of embezzlement and demanding an investigation. The move was risky but necessary, and it didn't take long for the company to act. Mia was called into a meeting with HR, her heart pounding as she faced the stone-faced executives. "We've received allegations of misconduct," one of them began, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were copies of the emails and financial records Eric had uncovered. Mia's attempts to deny the accusations were weak at best. Her bosses informed her that she was being placed on administrative leave pending further investigation. As she left the building, her colleagues' whispers followed her down the hallway. Logan wasn't spared either. He was called into a similar meeting and found himself fumbling for explanations. Unlike Mia, he was less concerned about appearances and more about his own survival. He began deflecting blame, suggesting that Mia had orchestrated the scheme. The cracks in their partnership widened, each of them scrambling to protect themselves. The trust that had once bound them together dissolved into suspicion and self-preservation. Eric, watching from the sidelines, felt a grim satisfaction as their carefully constructed facade fell apart. For the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't just surviving this ordeal, he was reclaiming his life. That evening, as he stood in his quiet home, Eric allowed himself a moment of reflection. The man he had been just weeks ago, the devoted husband, the trusting partner, was gone. In his place stood someone stronger, someone who had faced betrayal and refused to let it break him. And he wasn't done yet. The battle wasn't over, but the tide was turning in his favor. Eric sat at the edge of his bed, the morning sunlight streaming through the curtains. The house felt emptier now, quieter without the rhythm of Mia's presence. Yet, that emptiness carried a strange sense of peace. It was the quiet of starting anew, the promise of a fresh beginning untainted by lies. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind. After Mia's suspension from work and Logan's failed attempts to deflect blame, the company conducted a full audit of their department. The findings were damning. Both had been implicated in a series of financial irregularities. Their once shining reputations were tarnished, their careers teetering on the edge of ruin. Eric had made sure to stay involved, but at arm's length. His lawyer Amanda had handled everything with precision, ensuring his own position remained secure. Still, the fallout from Mia's actions reached far beyond their marriage. That morning, Eric gathered the last of Mia's belongings into a cardboard box. She had been staying with a friend since the confrontation, her calls and messages growing increasingly desperate. At first, she'd pleaded for forgiveness, then tried to negotiate, and finally resorted to anger, accusing Eric of ruining her life. But he didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. As he taped the box shut, his phone buzzed. It was Tina, checking in as she often did now. "How are you holding up, big brother?" she asked. "Better," Eric said honestly. "I think I'm finally ready to let go." Tina's voice softened. "That's good. You deserve to move forward, Eric. She didn't define you. You were always more than that marriage." Her words stayed with him as he loaded the box into his car. He drove to the address Mia had given him and left the box on the doorstep, ringing the bell once before walking away. He didn't wait to see her reaction. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about him. In the weeks that followed, Eric began to rebuild his life piece by piece. He threw himself into his work, finding solace in its structure and predictability. His co-workers, many of whom had heard rumors about his situation, offered quiet support. One even suggested a local running club as a way to unwind. Eric hesitated at first. He wasn't sure if he was ready to meet new people, but eventually he gave it a shot. The first few runs were exhausting, both physically and emotionally, but they also brought a clarity he hadn't expected. As the miles passed beneath his feet, so too did the weight of his past. One Saturday, the running group planned a charity event, and Eric volunteered to help organize it. During the event, he found himself chatting with a woman named Claire who was setting up a donation booth. She was warm and genuine, her laughter infectious. They exchanged numbers, and over the next few weeks, their conversations grew more frequent. Claire wasn't pushy or demanding, she was simply there, offering companionship without expectation. For the first time in months, Eric felt a spark of hope, a reminder that life could move forward. Meanwhile, Eric stayed in touch with Amanda, who updated him on the ongoing fallout from Mia and Logan's actions. The company had filed formal charges against both, and the authorities were investigating. Eric wasn't vindictive by nature, but knowing they were being held accountable gave him closure. One evening, Tina visited with a bottle of wine, and they sat on the porch reminiscing about simpler times. "Do you ever think about what you'll do next?" she asked. "All the time," Eric admitted. "But for now, I'm focusing on the present. I've spent too long living in someone else's lies. It feels good to finally live for myself. Tina raised her glass. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, Eric echoed, clinking his glass against hers. By the end of the summer, Eric had transformed his life in ways he hadn't thought possible. He renovated the guest room into a home office, started painting again, an old hobby he'd abandoned years ago, and even adopted a rescue dog named Max. The cheerful Labrador filled the house with a warmth and energy that had been missing for so long. One afternoon, while walking Max in the park, Eric ran into Claire. They sat on a bench, laughing as Max tried to chase a squirrel. The moment was simple, unremarkable, and yet it felt like the start of something significant. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Eric reflected on how far he'd come. The betrayal that had once defined him now felt like a distant memory, a shadow that no longer loomed over his life. He had faced the worst and emerged stronger, more determined to live authentically and fully. For the first time in a long while, Eric felt free, not just from Mia, but from the pain and doubt that had weighed him down. The path ahead wasn't without challenges, but it was his to walk, and he knew, without a doubt, that he would walk it with strength and purpose.